Liberty Elementary School District Governing Board meeting for April 28, 2025 is called to order at the Jerry Roby District Facility Office. The time is now 5:30 on April 28, 2023. 5 board members are present. Board members Schmidt, Zimmerman, Kenyon, Cirincione, and myself, Todd. Move on to the Pledge of Allegiance, and Vice President Kenyon, if you can lead us, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item of business, 1.3, the approval of the special meeting agenda.
Mr. President, motion to approve this agenda consistent with board policy BE, DB, and temporary suspend governing board policy with which this agenda may be inconsistent.
Have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 1.3, the approval of the special meeting agenda. Hearing if there's no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Board Member Schmidt.
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman.
Aye.
Vice President Kenyon.
Aye.
Board Member Cirincione.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Will show that approved. 5 yes, 0 no. Next on our agenda is item 1.4, Freedom Incident on April 23rd, 2025. This will be an update from Chief Robert Sanders from Buckeye PD.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, board members. Appreciate the time to have a brief few minutes to go over exactly what occurred last week. Again, I'm Bob Sanders, Buckeye Police Chief, and it's very important for us as a police department to come speak to board members, parents, teachers, and everybody in the community who has concerns. I am a parent. I raise my kids with school threats, so I understand it from that perspective. I also understand it from a perspective of a police officer and a police chief. Am I in charge of my PowerPoint? I promise it's very short. I only have one slide, really. Thank you. Okay. I didn't know if you need me to clip myself on. All right, thank you. Real briefly, about the same time the students were being released at 3:49 p.m., we received a 911 call. Now what's going on at the same time in the city of Buckeye, we also had 5 or 6 officers over at a home where some person decided they wanted a target practice in their backyard in the middle of Sundance. So at the same time, we're responding to that. At 3:53, we received information that the person with the gun was walking away. The initial 911 call, so you can understand what's going on at our dispatch center, we have 1 person on the radio and we have 2 people answering 911 calls. Of course, we're being flooded with 911 calls from this incident and then the other incident. So this information is being pushed out to the officers. At 3:53, if you see the other highlighted, we were on scene. Now, fortunately, in this situation, I happened to be on scene. I was about 30 seconds behind the first officers arriving on scene. I know there's some concerns in the community that a lockdown hadn't taken place. By the time we arrived on scene, kids, parents, everybody was already in the parking lot. It was very chaotic at the time. You can see at 3:55, we actually contacted the one person who contacted us through 911. Sorry, I'll stop turning away here in case you're listening. We had 2 or 3 people on 911 giving us a contact and information. At 3:56, which is 3 minutes later after we arrived on scene, we had information that the suspect with the gun who had shown the gun didn't point it at anybody, even though some of that information came in that he actually pointed it. It's quite confusing, quite chaotic. He was walking away towards the neighborhood and our officer stopped him and detained him. So a total of 6 officers, 2 sergeants, 1 police chief, and probably a couple other people were on scene at the same time. The 1 adult was booked. He was released on his own recognizance a few hours later, and he'll be subject to prosecution at a later date. And then the 3 juveniles were arrested and processed. I'm more than happy to take questions. I know that doesn't do it justice and maybe address some of the concerns of the parents or the board members. I just let you know that the West Valley, the region, the Southwest Valley, we participate with Liberty School District, all the other school districts for Avondale, Goodyear, Sheriff's Department, and of course Buckeye PD. It's the same protocol, so all our officers and SROs are trained to respond the same to all school shooting incidents or active shooter, any type of threats to schools or the families of the kids. It's called the Standard Response Protocol.
Members, any questions?
Question and a comment. First, I just want to say thank you. That response time is incredible, and we're certainly grateful for your service and for responding so quickly. In terms of the concerns of the parents, the school does not need the police's permission to call a lockdown. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
so-
the only recommendation that comes from us. The school makes that final decision.
Okay. And were you in contact with the school during this time, or were you just responding to the 911 calls and assessing the scene as you got there?
From what I can tell through our call center, we were just responding. We hadn't contacted the school at that time just because the phones were so busy.
Okay. So there was just some confusion about whether, the Buckeye Police advised the school that a lockdown wasn't needed. And so it sounds like that was a rumor. Is that your understanding?
After the fact, after the person was already detained. So by the time we would provide any information or make that recommendation, we had already detained the person. If we were still looking for a person with a gun, well, again, the school had let out. There was a lot of kids and parents in the area. It would have been difficult to lock down. 'Cause
Sure.
then then there'd been different concerns. So if we were still looking for a suspect or a person with a gun, then it would have been quite different. We had had to handle it differently.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Mr. President. Thank you for coming out and sharing this information with us. Yes, it's always concerning whenever you hear that there's an individual with a firearm on a campus. So just kind of, I think I'm just going to reiterate the obvious, where school had let out, correct, when your officers arrived. And so that, like you said, they weren't in the parking lot because they were running away from a situation. They weren't in the parking lot because school had let out.
Normal day for them.
Thank you. And then at any time, was there any evidence that the individual drew his firearm or it was out of his holster?
No, sir. Always in his waistband.
Okay, thank you.
Again, thank you for coming out. One question, I don't know if it's too early for this, if it's still going on, like what recommendations do you have that if we should have handled this any differently, or anything you didn't like?
At this time, so during any type of incident like this, what went right? What could we do better? I cannot find any incidents or any type of suggestions I would have at this time, just because of the timing of the school being released.
Thank you.
Very well.
Chief, thank you for coming as well. We talked last week briefly about this, and I appreciate your time then. My questions are, from your indication, I know there was questions about being on lockdown, but it doesn't really appear that the campus knew that this incident was going on when the children began to be let out. So by the time that happened, they recognized there was an event taking place. Is that how you understand that they weren't aware that this was taking place on their campus?
Exactly who knew on campus or if the principal knew, we didn't. That wasn't part of our investigation. Okay. I saw social media also. I know some allegations or concerns were expressed. But again, the timing of the incident, calls were going to the school, calls were going to our 911 dispatch center. At the same time, they're going to our officers. 2 or 3 officers came from the station. That's why I followed them. That's where I was coming from. So any type of call like this is an all call for all officers in the area.
Great. Thank you very much.
Very well.
Appreciate it. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, sir.
Very much for your
Thanks
time.
for your service. Okay, members, next on our agenda is item 1.5, discussion consideration of the 2025-26 employee health benefits. Dr. Mahorn.
I'm going to give Karina just a few seconds to come up and talk. Looks like she's got some backup coming with her.
Backup. Ooh, I like it.
Last time we did have Lisa Weston come, but this time it's just going to be HR that's going to come and give a little bit of a summary on not only the survey, couldn't think of the word, survey that went out, but just some additional information that we actually just got today from Gallagher and Meritain. Go ahead, Karina.
Okay. Good evening, Governing Board. We are here today to bring back the 25-26 employee benefits package for your approval. As I'm sure you recall from the April 15th board meeting, we had 2 options for medical plan selections. And that was due to the fact that although we had a no rate increase, no premium increase this year guaranteed through ASBATE and Meritain, they did change our current plans unexpectedly and significantly. So we had brought forth another option to hopefully mitigate some of those changes for some of our employees. At that time, the board requested that we get some employee input on those options. And so we went out and we provided Gallagher actually produced an online survey for us to put forward to the employees. And they didn't have a lot of time. It was a couple days out there, but we did get 120 responses, which is about 45% of the returning employees that are currently enrolled in medical benefits with the district. I believe you have probably seen this already, but this is the results of that survey. However, good news, I think. This, as of today, ASBATE Meritain has actually approved us to be able to offer all 5 plans next year if we would like to. And then nobody will have to give up what they have currently. And if there are people who would like to move to that buy-up plan and change to something with a lower deductible and different co-pays, they would have that option as well. So that kind of gives you all a third option. If you can go with the original option 1, which was basically to renew our current plans that we have, which is what the employees voted for, or the majority of the respondents chose. Option 2 would have been we were going to drop one of the HDHP plans, the less expensive one, but with a higher copays and much higher deductible, and add this additional Value Gold plan that would have been $33 per month for an employee-only coverage. It would be what we call a buy-up, where an employee would actually pay a portion of the premium out of their paycheck. So now we have the option to go with option 1, option 2, or option 3 would be to offer all 5 plans. And that is up to you all to choose which one of those you would like. But I also want to make sure that tonight that we are also considering the Classic Gold plan, which is currently a grandfathered plan. If you recall from Lisa Weston's presentation on the 15th, that's a plan that is running hot, and it does have a lot of effect on what our renewal rates will be. And it's something that we would like to look at. We would like to recommend that it sunsets that plan June 30th, 2026. So it's currently closed to new enrollees anyway. The only folks who can enroll in that plan are people who are already enrolled in it. And this would give us an opportunity to get them a year's warning that this plan will not be available again next year.
Members, any questions?
I had a couple questions.
Then go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I said go ahead. I was giving you the floor.
I just didn't hear you. Were there comments? Were there the ability to leave comments on the survey?
There was.
Okay. So I did ask for those, and I think those would have, that I didn't receive, and I think that those would have been beneficial for us to be able to see when deciding between the 2 plans, because there is a majority, but I was curious if those that chose the second option were because of that Value Gold. And the importance of that, and kind of sunsetting the Classic Gold. In terms of the Classic Gold running hot, there was a high deductible plan that was also running pretty hot in that, presentation that we saw at the last meeting. Are there any fees associated with offering all 5 plans?
No.
Okay.
We basically asked, considering the position that they put our district in, and they decided they would go ahead and allow it. Normally, they only allow you to carry 3 plans, to offer 3. So we've already been kind of running special with the grandfathered plan. So to ask for a 5th plan was really, Gallagher, the consultants there were like, they're never going to say yes, but they did. So, I think that's a great opportunity for our employees, at least for 1 year. I still think I do recommend grandfathering and sunsetting that the what is it, classic gold plan, just because it's a really rich plan and it's great for employees who need that kind of coverage. But it does, in the long run, it really hurts all the other employees and their opportunity to get coverage that they can afford, and that works for them too.
Well, I appreciate, your department and Gallagher, kind of going to Meritain and trying to get that offering of that 5th plan just to make it a little bit more palatable. It's still not a great situation in general for our employees, but, we got to do the best that we can. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, Mr. President.
You may.
Thank you for bringing this to us again. And your department does a great job.
Thank you.
Can I just get a little bit of clarification once again on that option 3? Would the 4 plans that we currently have be kept the same as well as what they currently are? Or is it going to be basically moving into one of these other areas for their deductibles? And
These are the plans, the new plans. Those are the plans that are being offered. They're
Right.
the old plan, the plans that don't exist in the same way anymore. This is what they are.
Okay.
So although there's no increase to premium, there is an increase to deductibles and
Right.
copays. So I personally feel the 5 options gives employees a pretty good range of options to choose from, what's going to work best for them and their family and their budget.
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, just a couple of housekeeping. Ms. Zimmerman, we did get an email from Dr. Mahorn just slightly before the meeting. I know they were working feverishly today to pull all the comments out, but there's an email that has looks like all the comments, right? It scrolls quite a bit. Just for everyone's sake, I think it's important for staff and everybody else to know this came as a complete surprise to us. We moved very quickly, and thank you to all the work that you guys have done on this. I know this came as a surprise. I think this was a game of dirty pool by Meritain, and
Agreed.
it wasn't. And Gallagher certainly worked hard to get this fixed. Shocking to them as well. Meritain seems to do some strange things sometimes. So I guess buyer beware. But just so everybody's aware, can you kind of go back a little bit? We had a meeting about a week and a half ago, and you had just found out then that they were increasing these premiums and deductibles. Can you just kind of paint a timeline in case people miss that meeting? They'll know, they'll be able to see it now.
The timeline would be, so usually our renewal from Asbate Meritain comes in on March 1st. Now, as you remember, the prior year, we were all patting ourselves on the back because we had managed to get a 2-year rate freeze with no increase for this year. So we were just thrilled. And then to find out when we opened our renewal that the plans were completely different. And, although we're not going to be paying any more for them, the employees are not going to be receiving the same benefit. We didn't find that out till March 1st. And then
Was that March 1st, or it was March 1st we found that out?
it was March 1st that we got the renewal. It took us a few days to go through the plans and figure out that things weren't right. And then we took some time to look at mitigation, what can we do to offset these changes? And, trying to find out from Meritain, what happened, why did this come to us with no warning? There was nothing said by them that something's coming down the pike or there will be changes with your renewal, nothing. We just got a renewal and everything was different. So we heard some information that literally the changes to the plans were passed by the Board of Trustees, I think on February 28th, which was maybe it was like the 26th. It was like 2 days before the renewal date. So they hadn't really had any time to inform anybody of anything. And so Gallagher, was helping us try to get through that, work with ASBE to see what they could do, but there's no changing the plans. And, I guess we're lucky that we did have the rate, guaranteed, because we could be paying more for worse plans, It's kind of how just things shook out.
Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Any more? Okay, thank you very much.
Can I add one thing?
You may.
If you are voting to approve, you're voting to approve the entire package, which includes medical, dental, vision, life insurance, health savings account, flexible spending account, supplemental voluntary life insurance, short-term disability, critical care coverage, hospital indemnity, and supplemental accident insurance, as well as our retiree program. Which should be, I think all those are spelled out for you on the item.
All right, members, I'll take a motion.
I got a question for you, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
Since there's not an option 3 listed on here, can that be motion if somebody wants to do that?
Yes, because the subject topic is their discussion consideration of the employee health benefits. So that's all we're doing.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the 25-26 benefit plan packages for employees, including approval of option number 3 for medical plan offerings and sunset date of 6/30/26 for the grandfathered Classic Gold plan.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 1.5. That'll be the 25-26 benefit plan package for employees, including approval of option 3 for medical plan offerings and a sunset date of June 30th, 2026 for the grandfathered Classic Gold plan. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Board Member Schmidt.
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman.
Aye.
Vice President Kenyon.
Aye.
Board Member Srincioni.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show that approved 5 yes, 0 no.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next will be item 1.6, discussion consideration of the second reading and approval of the trust policies chapter 1 and 2 to be effective July 1st, 2025. Dr. Mahorn and Ms. Castellanos.
Good evening, governing board members. I am here today to discuss chapters 1 and 2 and the changes that we have compiled over the last week. So we've compiled the changes. I sent a draft version out with all of the comments on them. So today what we'll be doing is just going through the commented sections of these policies. And I will let you know that policies 203 and 203A have a revision and an update. So instead of going over those changes on that policy, we'll skip through that and I will send you guys the revised version that the trust has sent to us today. Any questions before we begin? Okay. Okay, so if we will start on page 3, President Todd had a comment on page 3. Is there any questions about that comment?
I had a question. Is that proposed language addition or is it just like a comment?
It's just a comment. So it was just something for the board to keep in mind. He's asking the board keep in mind that board policies must support and not restrict your authority of governing board members.
Yeah, I mean, we're approving the policies, so I think we can ensure that that occurs.
Okay. All right. Turning to page 5 is the next set of strike-throughs and comments. So on this one, President Todd and Vice President Kenyon had requested that the language in this where board member requests for information, this is that piece that required or anything that required over 2 hours that the superintendent could deny, and then it would be brought to a board meeting. So they have asked for this to be stricken, and I've offered some proposed language at the top. So I'll open that up for discussion.
Mr. President?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. My original concern was, when a board member requests information from their employee, the superintendent, that employee could deny that, and then who knows when the next board meeting is going to be. That might be very time sensitive information we need. And so thank you for this proposed language.
My concern is that, I do think we need to be cognizant of staff's time. And if the request is tied to an agenda item or, what we anticipate to be an agenda item, like we know the budget is coming, the budget revision in May, and there was something we wanted pulled. But to just, request things that aren't necessarily an agenda item that's going to take hours and hours. I don't know how, I agree that, if we ask for information, we should be able to get it. How quickly, if it's going to take staff over 2 hours of time, I don't think we can expect a 24-hour response time, which is our typical policy. So I don't know if there's some language that could be added that just said, tied to an agenda item, because if you're asking for an agenda item, then that's something different, right? Like this is just for information, correct?
Yeah, so this is just requesting information. It pertains to all information. So, and this section is optional.
And we don't currently have this in our current policies.
Yeah, you do have a
2 hour?
You have not the 2 hour restriction. I'm not positive about the 2 hour restriction.
I
Let
think
me.
that's in there.
But there is a board member request for information section in your current policy.
I think the 2 hours part is in. I didn't bring the crosswalk with me.
Yeah, I did not bring. I apologize.
I think at the end of the day, whether it's on an agenda or not, it could become one. And the board members need to be able to request the information that they need to conduct their job. Statute's very clear that you should have a very clear understanding of the happenings of the district. And I think that this could become a challenge down the road. Everything could become greater than 2 hours. Just compiling the data survey today could easily have taken more than 2 hours. Ms. Zimmerman, you had asked for some photocopies on Thursday at about 4:30 in the afternoon. That could have easily been called to take more than 2 hours. This is not a good practice to have this. There's no other board that has something like this except for maybe a school board somewhere that's adopted this optional language. But I think this is dangerous, and I'm looking again, but I don't think it's in our current policies at all to have a 2 hour requirement.
And all of this information would be sent to all board members after it's been collected, correct?
That is not in statute, or not, I'm sorry, not statute, but not in policy right now. So if the optional language that was offered above is just a response time being, like the response to the request being issued to all board members. But it is not in the language that says that the superintendent's response to such request shall be provided to all board members, but it's not there to say that the same information is going to be provided to all board members. That is not in this language.
Okay, if we're going to keep this language, I would like to see that added so that, if somebody's requesting something, then we all have the ability to view that.
Okay.
Because I do think that's addressed somewhere else in policy about when somebody asks a question, that the question is, sent to everybody, which I think is really good practice so that we're all getting the same information. And something that I had considered also is that there's like a Google Doc, a running list of like agenda topic requests. And so this would be something similar so that we can see what's being requested. So that would, you know, if we're going to keep this language, which I'm not opposed to, but I think, you know, just add a little bit to make sure that it is achieving what we want.
And we currently have that in here. It says superintendent's response to such request shall be provided to all board members. Is that the language you want? It's in the red line. The top section of the red line.
But I believe Ms. Castellano just said that that was just the response to receiving, not the actual final documents that were being asked for. Is that correct?
I mean, if we want to make the language really clear, we will need to add some language in there, right? Because right now, as it reads, it can be interpreted as just the response. So rather that response includes a bunch of documents that are attached with the response, or that response includes this is going to take 2 hours, or it might be the next day. Whatever that is, if we are looking at what's in the policy, it could be read as just the response.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have an issue with the wording that we should get it. I do agree that we should all get the responses. It's so that we're not also duplicating questions and requests, because that just takes more time, even if the time is just to tell us that somebody else asked for it and then have to get it for us. We're just using up more time in that case. So.
So is a proposal to add the language in for the additional language on the information that is gathered will be provided to all board members.
That's fine.
Okay. Are we okay to move on?
Yes, please.
All right. On page 5 as well, you'll look at communication protocols. Board Member Zimmerman and Board Member Schmidt had posed some questions about this communication protocols. The questions were directly about if we need to forward all of the information that we receive. So if any email that's sent to me by the public, does it need to then go out to the district administration? I made a note here. This language is optional as well. It's always best practices to have some level of a communication protocol. I did offer some optional language or revised language on the top of page 6. You'll see that. If we were to use that language, we would strike what is currently there.
I'm good with the proposed new language, the red line. I think it communicates what I was looking to achieve here.
Any other discussion on that section? Okay. Moving on to page 7. There is a note at the top. President Todd and Board Member Zimmerman had conversations about the time that an organizational meeting should occur, so that the organizational meeting should occur a minimum of 48 hours prior to any regularly scheduled meeting. That looks like that language is a little choppy, but happen 48 hours prior to any scheduled meeting. I'm not sure what that language would be.
Honestly, for me in January, I think it should be a week prior, because inevitably in, well, it depends on what January, but there could be new board members. And so I think giving that, we know that that's coming, right, in January potentially. And so when there are changes during the year, I'm fine with the 48 hours. But I think in January, it should be earlier to really give the potential new board president the opportunity to truly set the agenda. So I would propose that we have an organizational meeting within the first week in January.
I would support that. I don't think that's a bad practice at all.
Okay. And then 48 hours for all other organizational meetings that may occur. Okay. The second comment on here, President Todd mentions that all meetings should take place within the district boundaries.
Correct.
Okay. And then we also see the additional comment or the additional changes after a board president has been elected. So the organizational meeting can occur after a board president has been elected. The board may elect a vice president.
I'm not sure if we need that because we, in, very recent times had a situation where we did not elect a board president, but we did elect a vice president. And so I think that the way it states, so if we didn't elect a board president, then we wouldn't vote for a vice president.
Correct.
So then we'd have no leadership.
Actually, if I may, statute requires you to have a president. If you don't have a president, then what you would do is you would have a vote each meeting for a president of the meeting. You can have a vice president if you have a president because they're acting in a restricted manner just on behalf of the president in their absence. But if you don't have a president, then you're in violation of statute. So you do have to elect a president for every meeting.
What statute is that?
I'll look it up. Hang on. The only position that the statute recognizes is the president.
Yeah, and I also recognize that as well. I went back and did some research as well, and I know what Board Member Zimmerman's referring to, and I would say in those meetings, we actually did it incorrectly, even according to our ASBA policy and statute. We should have had a board president elected every meeting, even if it's a temporary board president for that meeting. And if we weren't able to elect a board president, the meeting couldn't go on. Is that correct, Mr. Dangerfield?
Well, as I look back at that, we had an even number of board members so that we were 2-2 split on that. I think, technically, we actually still had a vice president that existed because the motion never passed. So it would have been, Chris should have continued on as the vice president.
Because we already had a vice president at the time,
Yeah.
but we couldn't move on to electing a new vice president if we didn't have a president.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That's the way it should have happened.
So then why do we have a vice president?
It's not required by statute. It's something that the board chooses to do as a backup. It's just it's an operational process, but the statute does only require that you actually have a governing board president.
Okay, so if we're not going to allow the vice president, according to statute, which I really like to have the statute, I'm not saying right this instant, I'm just saying I'd like to see it.
15,321.
Then I'm not sure that it's necessary that we have a board vice president if they can't act in the absence of the president.
But they can.
Oh, they
because-
can do that by policy. You can do that, but and it's probably helpful to have a vice president elected so that there is someone in place. But then, if you didn't have one, then you would have to in each meeting. You would, as Mr. Todd said, you'd have to try to elect. You have to try to elect a president. And if you have a split vote, it's just going to really be a difficult problem. So if the motion doesn't passes under Robert's Rules of Order, it just stays the way it was already.
Okay, but right now, if we're going back to the situation we were in, we don't have Robert Rules of Order. That's not in our policy currently. Correct?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, well, I haven't seen it in our policy, so,
I think most districts operate on a very informal Robert's Rules of Order. I don't know that it's actually written into the policy or not.
It's not written, but previous legal said that it's implied that we follow rules of order. Robert's Rules of Order is the most common. That's what we've always defaulted
Yeah,
to.
that's all districts follow, just kind of a informal Robert's Rules of Order. It's not, if you were to follow the real book of the Robert's Rules of Order, it gets really, really complicated, but an informal process is what most school districts follow.
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
So just, we're at the same spot after a board president has been elected. I think that that language is necessary in there just to make this conversation we're having very clear that it's in our policy.
Okay. Any other discussion around this?
I'm just going to say for the record that I disagree.
Okay, is there any other discussion or any other requests about this particular change? Okay. On page 7, also, you'll see a redlined area under board presidency. The reason why this section is redlined and kind of highlighted, we will need to adopt a policy that says how we're going to approve agenda items, or not approved agenda items, I'm sorry, request agenda items. So one board member has requested that those agenda items only be requested in a public meeting, and another board member suggests that these can be requested at any point in time. I would like to open this up for discussion.
So this is, half of this is mine, and I think that it should be in a public meeting. If we're going to go back to 2 meetings a month, then I don't think that there's anything that urgent that we would be requesting, because the majority of the agenda is really set by the superintendent and the district and what they need on there to move the district forward. And then, we are adding things that, we feel are important. And so I think it's just transparent to the public. If we're emailing the board president, we don't know what each other is requesting. I just don't think it's transparent. I don't think it's good policy. And 2 meetings a month, I just can't imagine something so urgent that we would need something before 2 weeks.
Thank you.
So my thoughts on this again are, just because you request it on a meeting doesn't necessarily mean it's coming up to the very next meeting. I do think things come up, and as Ms. Zimmerman sits on the board longer and gets requests from constituents, there is a time. Also, there are times when we do not have 2 meetings a month. One gets canceled because we're slow in the summer. That has happened many, many years where we shorten up in the summertime. If you miss that by 1 day, you're now looking at potentially almost 2 months before something's heard. So I very strongly feel that a board member should be able to be allowed to do their job. And if they've got something from their constituents, it shouldn't be, well, you're gonna have to wait for a month to get this heard. So I don't think it hurts at all to have it be requested anytime. I do think by limiting it just to a public meeting, that can delay and hurt forward progress of the district. It's going to be transparent because it's going to be on the agenda. It's also available in any public records request and email of where it is. So it is 100% transparent to be able to send this in at any time.
Again, for the record, I disagree. And I think if the rest of the board is going to adopt this idea, then I think there should be language in there that says that there is a running document that we're all able to see what the requests are. Because if they're not done in a public meeting, and the question of, it is up to the board president to identify when those make it on the agenda. And so I think we should know how many requests are being made, because if they're not made in a public meeting, we have no idea. So I think there should be some Google document that lists the requests that are coming in, since we're not going to be privy to them because they're not being done in a public meeting.
So my understanding then is, if we were to adopt this language, you are asking for additional language that would state that each request would be put on a board or on a document. I don't want to name the platform, right?
Yeah,
But each
absolutely.
request would be put on a document and be tracked.
That all board members have access to, along with the superintendent.
Any thoughts?
If I may, that I'm okay with the language as it is. I don't know that I agree with board member Zimmerman that it would be nice to see all those things, but I don't know that needs to be in the policy. I think that's at the discretion of the board president, whoever that may be, because there's different ways that they are going to work with the superintendent to organize the agenda, and there's different ways that they have to work together, and everybody has different ways of utilizing certain things. I don't know that it's necessary. I think the board elects a president to help with those things. And if the board president isn't doing what he or she is supposed to be doing, then they elect a new board president. I don't know that it's needs to be in the agenda, in the policy.
Okay. Any other conversation?
I disagree for the record.
Mr. President, Mayor.
You may.
The only question I have about that is, I don't know if we should be emailing the board president and the superintendent, not just the board president.
You want to email both? Or just one or the other?
I'm thinking it should be both. At least I think the superintendent should at least be courtesy copied on, just so they're tracking what's going on.
That's fine. I think it serves as a good catch-all in case one's missed. I'm fine with that.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So if you're going to allow it to happen through email, does that mean it won't be an agenda item on board meetings any longer?
No, we can still have it on a board meeting as well. It can be either or.
Any other discussion? Okay, turning to page 8. This question was from President Todd. Statute states as superintendent and the board president, can the superintendent designate board members to consult with legal? And I will leave this to Mr. Dangerfield.
So the policy says that the governing board's policy says that only the board president and the superintendent are designated to speak to the district's attorney. However, you can distribute that, but the statute, there is no statute that says specifically that that's what the rule is.
Okay.
It's in policy. So the governing board can decide how to do that, but you do want to have some control over that for sure. It would be very disruptive to have everybody just calling the attorney for questions. So it's whatever the board wants to do. It's very common for a superintendent to designate, like for a CFO to be able to, if there's a contract or something that they're working on, to be able to talk to the attorney specifically if they've been delegated that responsibility for that, or the HR office to be able to call the attorney about an HR issue too. So it's common.
My question was more if a board member asks the superintendent a question, they're not sure, can the superintendent say, I don't know, call the lawyer? Or we should keep that more the board president and the superintendent with a few designees, such as chief financial officer, in a finite rule of a contract review
That
or
would be
something
the
like that.
board's discretion,
Okay.
how you want to make that policy.
Any other discussion? Okay, turning to page 10. There was a question about the fingerprint clearance card, the IVP cards, being required of board members. This was discussed in our first read as well. And in that first read, after doing some research, that we can't require it, that it's not in statute anywhere where it's enforceable. So requiring something that's not enforceable is problematic, of course. Mr. Dangerfield.
Yeah, I was just going to say it should be, and the question should really go to the state legislature, because I agree it should be a requirement for a school board member to have a fingerprint clearance card, but it's not currently a requirement in the law, and so you can't enforce. There's no way to enforce it.
We had a very lengthy discussion during the study session about this. And so there was some questions about whether could we not put in policy that if you don't have a fingerprint clearance card, you can't go to school campuses. You can still be a board member. You can be on the dais. There's nothing that requires a board member to be on campus.
And actually, the rule with that for fingerprinting is that as long as a person is supervised and on a campus, there's lots of people on a campus that don't have fingerprint clearance cards. Parents, someone that it might be coming off a work assignment to do something at the school. It's just they have to be supervised if they don't have if they're not fingerprint cleared.
So, I think that we could, word this a little bit stronger, that, I think by adding while not required kind of gives it the caveat. I would, suggest that we remove that and just say that, it's strongly recommended, something to that nature. But I do think by us not taking a stronger stance, it doesn't show parents that we're committed to student safety. And I think that there are ways that we could do it. And, in terms of what's enforceable, frankly, none of these policies are enforceable except by ourselves. So to say that this particular one isn't, I think is a little unfair, personally.
Yes, well, I understand what you're saying, but fact is, the matter is, you can't create statute out of.
No, I understand that.
So you can't require a governing board member to get a fingerprint clearance card, but you could have a policy that they would be supervised and always have someone with them if they were on the campus. I think that's generally what happens anyway with the governing board member.
But not when we're attending like extracurricular events and things like that. We're not being, nobody's walking around with us.
Right, that is correct, but that's the whole public's like that.
So are you suggesting that board members who do not have a fingerprint clearance card should not be allowed to attend the after-school activities?
I think we'd have it's a public event. Foresee that happening. We went through this ad nauseum at about 2 years ago, and it was made very clear then by different legal counsel that this is just where we're at. You can't restrict somebody from coming on. And honestly, they even pointed out at that time that there are people who cannot pass a fingerprint clearance, but they're parents, and they are allowed to be on the campus with their child. So the reality is, you could have people on campus right now who cannot pass the fingerprint, but they have a student there, and they're allowed to be on the campus with their student.
That is correct. And so it's just the responsibility of staff and employees to be monitoring. Safety is certainly the responsibility of the school district all along.
Yeah, Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
Yeah, I would agree that we take security and safety of our campuses, our kids, very, very seriously as a school board, and also the school administration, all the way down to everybody who works in the schools. I've been around it for quite a while. I've seen how people operate. I'm okay with the language as it is, just because, as was stated, we can't force anybody to get a fingerprint clearance card. I would recommend that everybody has one as well. It just shows more safety, right? But because statute is what statute is, you can't force it. And so I would be reluctant to try to tie the hands of an elected official versus just somebody in the public who's able to walk right onto a campus. Should be supervised unless it's after school activity, district activity, and trying to tie the hands of a board member. I don't know that that's necessary. I think at the end of the day, if there's a problem with a board member, it's the public's responsibility to vote them out. And that's what elections are for. So go ahead.
I think to your point, there is statute too that I believe it passed last year that a sex offender cannot run for school board. I think that did pass, didn't it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'm pretty sure it passed last session.
I just want to make a clarifying point that sometimes people aren't elected and they are appointed to this position.
Mm-hmm. So I would suggest perhaps what Kelly's getting, Mrs. Zimmerman's getting at, while not required, that could certainly be removed and just say it is recommended that board members be fingerprinted for purposes of background screening. I mean, you could just take that, it's while not required, off and just say it is recommended. I don't think that's bad policy, but that's your choice.
I'm okay either way the board wants.
The language that's in there now is from the trust, correct? just had a lot of
That
legal
is
review.
correct. Yeah.
I think we just follow what the legal review has been.
Okay. Any other discussion? Turning to page 13, there was a question about why the genetic code language was removed throughout. During our last meeting, there was lengthy discussion as well about what genetic code meant, and it was the opinion of the governing board members at the time that genetic code and disability were all, it was kind of intertwined because genetic code specifically was a 2008 adoption.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, that was my question. And I was not on the board at the time, so I wasn't sure what the discussion around that was. But I do work in the field, so I know the GENA Act. And I realize that it's for health insurance and employment, just that it doesn't necessarily hurt to spell it out. But I understand the thought that disability would cover it. Not sure it's quite the same thing, but I think it covers it. But thank you for answering.
Absolutely. On page 16, we added in to any place throughout the documents where there is a position listed, we added in language that said, if this person is unavailable, all inquiries will be forwarded to their supervisor. Any discussion around that? Okay. On page 20, we added the word online to the sexual harassment policy. So sexual harassment is prohibited at the workplace, online, and at the district sponsored events. On page 21, Ms. Zimmerman asked if we could add that the superintendent will notify board members of complaints, investigation process, and outcome of said investigation for sexual harassment claims. Any question?
You know, the more that I have thought about this, I just don't know if it's, whether we should really have all of that information and whether it's pertinent. I think I'm okay to remove it.
To remove that suggestion? Okay. As I mentioned, the policy 202A is going to be revised, so we won't go through the changes in that. I will, before I leave today, you all will have a copy of the revised 202A and 203.
Will the changes be redlined?
There are no changes because it's the existing, the trust just revised the policy.
Okay.
So it's a brand new revised policy, and I apologize if we could go back to 202A. It was 203 that was replaced. So if we could go back to 202A, it's page 23. We took out specific names of individuals and moved it to the assistant superintendent, and then if this person is unavailable. So those were the only changes made to that policy. I apologize.
Just like a formatting thing at the bottom of page 23 where it says resources and then a phone number. Is the word resources supposed to be there?
No, what happened was the red line went too far. So yeah, that needs to be, yeah, I will check the formatting on that. Thank you. So because 203 is being updated by the trust, and that is the one you'll have, if you can skip to page 38. So on page 38, we will start with the next policy, which is 301, Rules of Order. President Todd asked that we directly spell out that the rules of order are the Roberts Rules of Order.
I disagree. I think that the rules of order should be followed as listed and that we shouldn't, be able to kind of change the rules of order into something else that aren't spelled out for all board members to know.
Page 38, yes. Any other discussion?
Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, Mr. President. As was stated earlier, I think, and you know, Mr. Dangerfield, you had stated that it's pretty much a given that every board, every district uses this on an informal level. And with this, just spelling it out as, you know, we're going to have our order that we do things, but then as a default, we're always going to go back and check with Robert's rules if there's a question. Is that my understanding of what this is saying here?
Yes, I'm not sure I'd go to the point of saying newly revised because you're getting into quite technical problems there. Are you just talking about an informal Robert's
Well,
rules or what?
Robert's Rules newly revised specifies the most recent time because it started in 1915, which there's been a lot of procedures from them. So if you do the newly revised version, that is the most recent, and that's what is standard across most boards. You just follow the most recent guidelines. That keeps you from pulling a one member says, I want to use the 1915 version. Somebody else says they want to use the 1980 something
I see,
version.
yes, that's
Cleans
what-
that up. And that's kind of what they have. Roberts, the abbreviation of that is just that. That's why
I
you
think
have
that's-
RO
yeah, I
and
think
R.
that's-
It's
that's
Robert's
fine.
Rules newly revised. That keeps you the most recent version.
Mr. President, may I?
You may.
So I'm in favor of this only because of the language that precedes it and the matter of procedures not otherwise addressed by these rules or applicable district policies. Then it takes effect.
Right, but we get into the same situation we were at the last meeting where we had a reconsideration. That's not part of our policies, and so we just pulled that out, and now we're doing something that isn't identified. So I disagree.
Well, that prevents it because now it's identified.
Any other discussion? Page 41. This was directly just to say that all meetings shall take place in district. On page 42, there are two options here, and this comes down to the board deciding how the agenda items are made, and it sounds like we had that discussion earlier. But then there's also the option, the two options. So I want to open it up for discussion and see which option that the board would prefer.
I prefer option 2.
So the reason why I proposed option 1 is this is a board meeting. This is not a superintendent's meeting. The superintendent, certainly anything they want to get on the agenda, they should be working with the president. But throughout the state, as recent as today, we have superintendents who are vetoing things that board members and board presidents want to put on an agenda. So by changing this language, the board president is authorized to develop the agenda with each board meeting in collaboration with the superintendent. They're both involved, but it takes away the veto power of a superintendent, as this is a board meeting and the public has elected the board to vote and to run the meeting. A board would not set the cabinet meeting, and the superintendent would not set everything on a board meeting. There are certainly things that they need to get on the agenda, and that should happen, but there should not be a veto power of a superintendent, which actually happened in this district several years ago. The board president at the time came to a group of parents and said, I'm trying to get this on the agenda, but Dr. Rogers will not allow me to put it on. So we have real-time, true history in this district of where a superintendent vetoed things that the president wanted on the board.
And I believe that option 2 addresses all of those concerns as well.
Does.
President Todd, it removes any veto power of agenda items requested by board members, and then it also puts the final approval of the agenda with the board president. So just for your consideration, we were just looking to clean that language up just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, either way, I'm just making sure that there's no veto power of a superintendent. This is a board meeting.
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
I am in favor of option one. The reason being is what you had just stated, that it needs to be very evident that this is a board meeting. It's not a superintendent meeting. And that this, you basically said everything I needed to say, but this is a meeting that we come here and do business, and we don't need some rogue superintendent to start running our meetings instead of us, and delegating what's on there. So I understand that both have that information that, the superintendent can't veto anything or keep anything off. However, I do like it that it spells out in option one that first, it's the board president is authorized to develop the agenda in collaboration with the superintendent, but it starts with the board president. That just kind of sets the tone that I like in this language.
Can I add an additional comment?
May.
I just want us to remember that we should all be working collaboratively. It shouldn't be us, the board, versus the superintendent. And I feel like, the way that this discussion is going feels that way to me personally. And I just want us to remember that, we all have to work together for the benefit of students. And so I just want us to keep that in mind. And, I'm still in favor of option two. I do think it, spells out that the superintendent doesn't have veto power. And in the end, it is the board president that has the final approval of the agenda, which is appropriate in the way that it's supposed to be. I agree with that. So I just personally agree with the language and the way it's written with option two. I feel like it forms a more collaborative approach because we both need the superintendent and the board to run a school district.
So I'm a little unclear, I apologize, but I'm a little unclear on which option we are leaning towards for inclusion in this round of edits.
I like the wording of option two, personally.
I feel like they both say the same thing. They're just different order, but they say the same thing.
Okay. Any further discussion? Thank you. On page 43, the order of the regular meetings. So this section that you see redlined here was all inserted by the district. So all of this can be removed, but if we were to include it, there was a proposal to remove all the things that are not pertinent so that we're not tying the hands of the board in how they run their meetings. So I'll open this up for discussion. The options here are remove this in its entirety, or to have the agenda, like the regular meeting agenda, set with just the things that are in black. So leave this in here with only the things that are in black.
So just for some background, so the other board members know, I requested this. There are times, for example, the last couple of meetings where you were coming to present to us, but we had meeting ahead of time. We're paying a lot of lawyers and you and others who are coming in from the time you get here, trying to guess how long that's going to be. We certainly don't want to tell you be here at 7 if we really want you here at 6, or if we need you here at 6. But if an executive session goes short or anything of that nature, the board president needs to have the ability on the fly to reshuffle an agenda. You see this at city council meetings, you see this at the state legislature. It's very common that you can reshuffle the agenda without having to slow progress, go back and do votes. If we came out of an executive session an hour early and we were waiting for you, we could just move your section down, pick something else up, and continue the continuity and the flow of the meeting. So that was my request, to make this a little more flexible for whoever's running the meeting.
Thank you.
I'm fine with it not being numbered, in terms of, the order can be moved, but I do think it's nice for if somebody were to come in and be board president and don't have like a lot of background information or, that kind of thing, because I think, having those potential things that can be on an agenda, but I think there could be some language added that, you know, these are potential agenda items, but not necessarily in this order. I'm fine with the order being moved around. But I like them listed in policy.
So you're suggesting that we keep all of them listed
Yeah.
and then just move the language to the following components will be, or instead of will be listed, can be listed within every board meeting,
Yeah, that would be fine.
and not in any particular order.
Yeah, I think adding that last phrase, you know, is helpful, and then it gives the board president the full flexibility.
That's fine. I would hope whoever seeks the position as president has a little bit of experience and knows what these topics are, but if we leave it in, it doesn't hurt. The main thing was having the flexibility. So if we need to move something on the fly, there could be any number of things that happen, maybe even a police chief coming to speak and he's on a call. We don't want to hold up a meeting and be stuck. So that was my main goal, was to be able to just reshuffle if we need to. What we put in here, we want all these elements. We don't want to discard any of the elements of the meeting, but we definitely may need to move them around from time to time.
Okay, page 44. President Todd is requesting to have an ADA compliant email set up by the district, and have cabinet members be checking that email. This, President Todd, do you want to speak to this, or would you like me to?
Yeah, no, I don't mind. On the rare occasion, Ms. Camerata takes a day off, which is never heard of, except for maybe once in her lifetime. If we have a meeting coming up and somebody calls and leaves her a voicemail and she's out, maybe she's tending to a family emergency or an illness, that may not go received, and somebody may show up at the next meeting. Remember, we only post 24 hours ahead of a meeting sometimes. It gives very little time to correct that. And if they show up, even at the 48-hour mark, we want to do everything possible. So if we have a hotline set up or a general email that also is monitored by multiple people, we never drop the ball. And that's the main thing. We want to make sure that we're absolutely taking care of anybody that has an ADA request. And we're not putting this on one person who, quite honestly, may be on vacation, may be sick, may have a family emergency. Those are all things that Minnie might take days off for. She doesn't typically take personal days, which is, I wish she would, just because she works so many hours, but that's a whole nother conversation. But that was the main thing for this, so it can be monitored, and we never miss that. We never miss that.
All right. Further down the page, you'll see under public participation in board meetings, President Todd proposed the additional language that's there.
So this would be a change from the way we're currently handling public comment, because right now the vice president calls the speakers. I just clarifying.
Well, the president could delegate that. It's just saying that they're being recognized. So if the president was to delegate to the vice president to call the public comment, then that would be fine as well. So maybe we say recognized by the board president or their designee. Because currently, I don't think we have either in policy as to who calls it out. It just seems to be, we're shuffling a meeting, it was easier. I kind of started doing that, having the vice president call the speakers.
Yeah, I think currently in policy it says president.
Okay, on page 46 is the next. So in the meeting minutes, asking for the names of the members who propose each motion and the person that seconds that motion. And there was a question as well from Mr. Dangerfield about what are considered working days. So because the district is Monday through Thursday, are we Monday through Thursday working days, or is it Monday through Friday?
No, working days are Monday through Friday. It doesn't change for the district just because we've changed our schedule here. Working days are Monday through Friday.
Okay. Any questions or discussions about that? Moving on to page 47. President Todd has requested that there's a minimum of 2 reads for the policy adoptions and a 30-day waiting period before the adoption or after the adoption of the policy before it goes into effect in order to allow the whatever necessary changes that maybe a site has to make or whatever else, but to allow an adjustment period. So they're asking for 30 days from the day that the policy is adopted for it to take effect. No, I'm not. I'm just staring into your eyes, apparently.
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
No, I like this just because, a lot of times we, as a board, will adopt a policy and it goes into effect right away. And a lot of times we're in violation of that policy right away because it takes time to make those changes. And so this kind of clears that up for us. And thank you, President Todd, for proposing this information.
Mr. President, may I?
May.
I have a question about this. Just say there is that weird chance where we need to implement something immediately. Can we override this by vote?
I think that's acceptable if we need to do it. There may be something, for example, that comes down from the Department of Education that we have to jump a little faster. There may be something from our insurance company that makes us make some changes quickly. But overall, general things, I think the 30-day policy is best, but I'm certainly willing to put some language in there to cover emergent actions.
I'm also in support of having it be 2 reads. I think it gives people time to consider the options and the public to weigh in as well.
So the only change that we would be making to this section is to add language that unless deemed emergent by the governing board's majority vote, then this would be the policy, the 30-day adoption. Is that accurate?
I think so. I think it's actually, so right there before it says the 30 days after adoption of said policy, at the beginning of that sentence, it says unless specifically noted. So I think if we just kind of know that, while we're adopting a policy, we as a board can say this needs to go in effect immediately, or, we can discuss that.
Just so I understand, like, the procedure. So that'll just be in the motion, right? Like, immediately adopt. Okay.
Okay, moving on to page 48, the suspension of policies. Board member Zimmerman asked, why would the board need to suspend a policy? So I'll leave that up to Mr. Dangerfield to discuss.
I'm not exactly sure what the question is. I do think that there should be an option for the governing board to suspend a policy. We do it at the beginning of each board meeting, actually, right now, when you say the language. I could even quote it.
Yeah, I understand. I do know that we do suspend it. I just think it opens us up to, could be misused, in my opinion. But I understand that it probably will be there regardless.
Mr. President, for me?
You may.
I think I agree. We should be able to suspend it if needed. I think that our board has a history of suspending the board policies at the beginning of every meeting, and that's kind of a dangerous thing. I think that if we can pull ourselves more in compliance to our policy, then we wouldn't have to suspend it all the time. That way we're more following our policy. We don't have to jump around when at times we can say, okay, now it's time to suspend a policy because we're dealing with a unique situation. So I agree I think we need the option to suspend it, but I caution the board, I hope we would get more in line with our policy so we don't have to suspend it every meeting.
I think we're in line with it. It's for the rare times where you have an issue that comes about, and then you trigger a whole bunch of discussion and additional work to go suspend policy. Then it's very common language in most every public meeting, councils, everybody else. That language is in there because the rare times it does happen when you're out of policy. There's a reason for that, and you're gonna delay meetings and delay decisions that can get caught up through Robert's rules, you can
I
get
believe
tied
the
up.
one that you're reading right at the beginning is just to suspend the agenda policy.
Right.
The way the agenda is put together. So that's just to allow the meeting to go on as it's printed and as is presented to the public in the agenda.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, that is the remainder of the edits for chapter 1, and we can move on to chapter 2. So chapters 2, our edits begin on page 1, and President Todd has asked the question, if this specific, the superintendent shall represent the district in all matters of concern to employee organizations and individual employees. Does this prevent board members from speaking to district employees? And so, Mr. Dangerfield, I will open that up for you.
For me?
Yes.
I'm not sure. What does the board want to do with that? It's not really a legal issue that I know of. It's a board policy. I think that, well, I mean, it's really a board policy. I don't, are you asking for a legal opinion about that?
So my question was, as it reads, the superintendent shall represent the district in all matters of concern to employee organizations and individual employees. We're elected officials, and that seems to me like that prevents an elected official from speaking to these groups. If an individual employee comes up and wants to talk to you and they're a taxpayer in the district, it seems like it'd be pretty strange to tell them, sorry, can't talk to you. That
No,
doesn't
and
seem
I
like
don't
it's
think
right.
that's actually what it's saying, but,
Okay.
and if you want to tone the language somehow, that's certainly fine with me. But the superintendent represents the formal process for people to file complaints or to employees to handle the process. But that doesn't, there's no way you're going to stop people from talking to their friends or expressing their concerns. That's going to happen. And it's, I wouldn't say that's a violation of policy. You can change that language if you want, certainly.
Just thinking maybe if we drop the shall and say the superintendent represents the district.
That's probably good. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, the next question that President Todd had was he's asking if the board is comfortable with the $100,000 limit, procurement limit that is set for the superintendent.
I would just add that that is the standard rule with the uniform system of
That's what I was going to ask.
it's a uniform system of financial records that the Auditor General has produced for the state. That's the standard rule. It's up to 10,000. There's discretion with one vendor, with any one particular vendor in a fiscal year. The superintendent can make decisions up to 10,000. From 10,000 to 100,000, you've delegated through that uniform system of financial records for the superintendent and his staff, the office, the chief financial officer, to make those decisions moving forward. And then above 100,000 it has to come to you for the board to approve those transactions. So that's just the standard process here in the state.
And I'm fine with that. I just wanted to call it out since it was a number, just make sure the board was still comfortable with that.
The other suggestion here was that the superintendent get board approval to close school buildings or other facilities.
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
So it says the superintendent with board approval may close any or all school buildings or facilities as permitted by law. I guess my question is this referring, I mean, it doesn't have a timeline on this. Is this talking about an immediate closure, like you have an incident at a school and you need to close that school or something happens there? Or is this talking about a permanent closure?
I think this is missing a word, and that is temporary.
Okay.
The superintendent And I'm not sure you want with board approval, because if there's an emergency situation or whatever, is he going to try to reach out to the board to get a decision from you folks? I think he needs authority in a temporary situation, an unusual situation. To build it. I think this was originally designed for like snow days, up in Flagstaff. Or
Snow
whatever.
days.
Now, we don't have them here. We'd more have a hot day,
If it's
Yeah, but
temporarily,
we've had like a weather, like a rain and a flood where we've had to close our schools. So
You can't really have a board meeting to do that.
I agree.
no, if it's temporarily, I think that's fine. We don't need
I think
board
it's
approval.
missing that word,
Okay.
just missing the word temporary.
But, sorry, is there language then that when we're talking about permanently closing, that I
Oh,
would,
that's all in statute. That's,
Right.
there's a very big process.
but I mean in
for
our
that.
policy now,
Huh?
in our policy now though. So
Let me research that.
yeah, because if we can fix this one with the temporary, right, where he or she has the delegated authority to do that for a temporary situation versus, just in our own policy. I know it's in statute.
Yes.
I'm
that-
just saying there's a lot of things
Closing a
that,
school permanently is a big process.
correct.
It's all detailed.
I will research. I believe that might be in chapter 5, but I need to do some research to find where the policy is on that. I didn't know it's in, no.
I mean, I've just recently read chapter 5. I don't think it's in
Yeah,
chapter 5.
I didn't see it in there, but if you can find it.
If I can
Please do.
find it, great. If not, then I will do some
But
adjustments.
do you want us to make reference to the permanent closing of schools in here?
I mean, we can, right, at the bottom of the page, we have the ARSs, we can just have that as a reference. Yeah,
Oh, we can certainly put a reference in there, sure.
all right.
Mr. President, could I make a comment about this policy?
Hey,
I just want to draw our attention to that the duties of the superintendent, like the list of them is very different and much shorter than our current policies. And I just caution us that if they're not spelled out, it's more difficult to hold the superintendent accountable if those duties aren't. And so I
can
want.
you tell us where you're at? What,
I'm just making a general comment, sorry, about this versus our current policy CBA. And I wonder if there's some and I apologize that I didn't add this, ahead of time, but, and other duties as assigned by the governing board, or just give us a little bit more freedom, I guess, because it is so much shorter than our current duties and responsibilities of the superintendent.
so would you be willing to send some language to Ms. Castellanos, and then she could just, when we bring this back, we can look that over? Would that work?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so the next page, discussing the evaluation of the superintendent. There is Board Member Schmidt and Board Member Zimmerman asked a question related to the performance goals and the timeline. So they're suggesting that this timeline be changed from June 1st to July 3rd. Well,
No,
July 1st. No.
no. Change to June 1st through June 30th.
Yeah, change to June 1st through June 30th.
Yeah. This is something I feel very strongly about personally, is that if we are writing goals where we need to see the end of year achievement by students, which I would assume that we're writing goals for the superintendent that includes student achievement, we cannot know the results of those goals in the middle of the year and appropriately assess them. So I really would encourage the board to move this timeline.
I agree with Board Member Zimmerman. Evaluating performance for the superintendent in February when the school year doesn't end until the end of May seems just strange to me. So if we wait till the end of the school year, we get full school year performance. We can see all of the things. I know it gives us a shorter timeline for the evaluation, but school is over, so hopefully we can hit that timeline a little bit easier without all the other things going on. So I know there is that consideration that it does shorten our time frame, but I think it's important to see the whole year's information in order to make an educated decision on evaluation.
Can I offer a consideration as well? This also, if you all need to find a new superintendent based on the evaluations or something of that nature, that is the reason why they had, because I questioned this a lot when I first started working with school boards, like why would we evaluate a superintendent in the middle of the year? Part of that evaluation is in consideration of if you need to shop for a new superintendent and when they are available, and when contracts would be signing as well.
I think evaluating the superintendent and evaluating for performance pay are two different things. And I feel like we have discussed this ad nauseum at times. So I think that I understand what you're saying, but if we are evaluating for performance pay, I think it needs to be done in June. And we are evaluating typically the superintendent in December, like a mid-year. And so frankly, if we are going out for a new superintendent, we better decide. If we're deciding in February, it's too late, in my opinion. We've missed the window. So I think if we want to add language about a mid-year evaluation and then the performance pay evaluation in June, but I think we've already missed the window if we're waiting till February to search for a new superintendent.
I would agree. My concern about doing it in June is that is probably our least attended board meeting around. And I think the public in Ms. Zimmerman's quest for additional transparency, that's a rough time. What I might suggest is we do that towards the start of school, maybe in August or September timeframe when we have more residents, taxpayers, parents, teachers that are in the district. I don't know how that works with time frame. I certainly understand her concern about performance pay and how do you do that off of, but we're going to have a weird, if we're doing this at two separate times, it's going to be kind of awkward if we're doing a meeting. So I think it does definitely deserve some discussion, and I understand what she's saying.
So my understanding right now is possibly changing this timeline either from June to August. Does it make a difference that the board meetings are recorded? Does that change opinions at all that they are recorded and that they are published so that the public can see them from anywhere?
And this part is done in executive session. So the public isn't watching us. They're just watching us make the final motion.
Okay.
Right, but that's the key part is the motion itself. And superintendent may request for it to be in a public meeting.
It's true.
So timeline, are you okay with going to July or August? Or I'm sorry, August, we said September?
Mr. Dangerfield, are we okay to, offer performance pay after the fiscal year for which the goals were written for?
It is a fiscal year issue. You do have the year ending on June 30th. But I think the school district could cut a purchase order, because you have an encumbrance period, and it lasts for 2 months after the end of the fiscal year, so it goes to August 31st.
Yeah, I'm not opposed, Mr. Todd, to having it in August. I just want to ensure that we have the data from the previous year is what I'm trying to get at. So if it's not a legal issue, you know what I mean? In terms of the contract and fiscal year and budget and all of those things, I'm fine with it being in August.
District could cut a purchase order in that current fiscal year for the maximum, and then the board could choose whatever they want to do. Actually, the purchase order could be reduced to what the real amount is, but they would need to set it aside, the money aside.
And honestly, I think it would be easier for staff because we're waiting for that data to come in from the state in June, and we're hoping that it's going to be in by, June 10th or whatever we're aiming for. So I'm fine with moving it to August.
Okay, so do we want to, Mr. Dangerfield, just a quick question. If the encumbrances can only be done until August 31st, then is the,
You have to encumber by the end of the fiscal year.
by the end of the
June
fiscal
30th,
year?
June 30th.
But the purchase order can only be written until August 31st?
The purchase order has to be done at that time you encumber it. They have to, then they would pay it out.
Okay, but they have to pay
At
it.
the end of the encumbrance period, which would be the end of August.
So then the evaluation period would need to be July 1 through July 31 in order to make sure that you had time to do the you get all the documentation back, have time to do the evaluation, and then have the public meeting with that. Is that accurate? I'm just trying to walk this back from if we have to pay it out by August 31st, then you all will
It
need
would be better
time.
if you had the evaluation by the end of the year, by the fiscal year, and then pay out sometime in the next few weeks, with the purchase order encumbered. It would be better to do it by the end of the fiscal year.
Or do we just pay on performance pay in arrears? So we use last year's data to bring them.
I think that's the way it was intended when it was originally
Right.
set up. You're really using the previous year's
year.
performance of students as part of your determination rather than the current year. But certainly it's not a problem. I mean, you can do it the way Ms. Zimmerman is suggesting. But I think the way it was originally designed is you're using evaluations from before.
Yeah, but when you think about you're evaluating somebody for the whole year all the way in March, I don't know how effective that is to like impact change if, we want to encourage something else to evaluate somebody basically 9 months later after the end and a whole year, right? Potentially or a year and a half if you're going back to the beginning of the year. So I'm not in favor of evaluating for the previous year. And if we get on the schedule of paying the performance pay like the following fiscal year, does it matter what fiscal year we're paying for it as long as it's budgeted?
That's a good question. I mean, districts are supposed to pay for their expenses incurred during the year, that it happened. And so that's why you have the encumbrance period of 2 months, but that's to clean up all your outstanding purchase orders and bills that came through from the previous fiscal year. So you are supposed to pay for your services and provided during the fiscal year that it occurred.
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
I hear the conversation and I agree that it would be nice to have all the information. This time period between February 1st and March 30th, that's standard, correct? I mean, that's the language that came to us from the trust. That's the language we had with the ASBA. That's kind of the standard
It's real
time
common.
frame.
Yes, that is common. It's in most superintendents'
So
contracts.
I'm just curious why we would be the only district that's raising this question. Is there something we're missing that this is here? And Ms. Castellanos, you said that, you've questioned this quite a bit when you started. Do you think it's just because that's the time frame where if, they need to look for a new superintendent, that's the only reason, or could there be other legalities or issues that we're dealing with here? I hesitate to change it as our one board. I mean, I'm okay with it because I understand the situation. I just want to make sure we're not missing something that's going to get us in trouble later if every other district has this language.
I can get with the trust and ask them why this is the recommended language, and then send that justification back to you all.
I would appreciate that.
Okay. And then if that justification comes and it is just simply because of the search for the new superintendent language, if that comes, what would be the proposed change that we're asking for here? Is it June? Is it July? Is it August? I just want to be able to provide you all the information so that the third read is the final, right? Like,
Yeah.
we get.
I think it depends on what the answer comes back with why they have it.
I wonder, I think July is a tricky time for vacations and different things like that. I just wonder, could I don't want to, I know the board members have said, I don't want us to tie us to something too specific. So if we say, the last week of July and first week of August, that's obviously very specific. But it would allow, if we, did it the first week of August, that would give us 3 or 4 weeks to issue that performance pay. And again, if we're going back to 2 meetings a month, then that should give us enough time to fit into that encumbrance period.
Yeah, and I'm just looking for what the evaluation period is going to be. So when you all decide to have the meeting, that's your decision, right? But when does the evaluation period start and when does the evaluation period end? And then you're setting the meeting and completing the evaluation is a different conversation.
Oh, okay, I see.
If I may.
You may.
I think then what we're looking at for an option then, what I'm hearing is June 1st through July 31st, I think is the time period. June 1st through July 31st, right? Because that gets us to the end of the fiscal year.
The fiscal year ends on June 30th.
Sorry, yes, you're right.
The encumbrance period.
Yes, the encumbrance period. Well, July, August.
Yeah.
So we could do July 1 through June 30th. So it's a full year, a full calendar year, right? So it's starting July. If we start the evaluation period on July 1, then it would go all the way through until the following year on June 30th.
No, I don't want it to be that wide because then a board could decide or a board majority could decide to do it in the middle of the year. And I'm not comfortable with that.
No, I'm talking about the evaluation period for the superintendent. So how long you'll be what is the 365-day period you're evaluating him
okay.
for? Them for.
Is that in this policy? This is just talking about the time period in which the evaluation will occur. I don't think what you're referring to is currently in the policy.
Okay. Let's go ahead and roll this conversation back and make sure. Let me do the research. And then you're saying that as long as we do the first couple of weeks in August, we should be okay for the actual time period or the timeline that the evaluation is held.
Yes. I mean, I think probably by August 15th at the very latest, because you think we're doing the evaluation at a meeting. And so then we'd have to give them enough time to issue that performance pay.
Okay. Any other discussion? I apologize. Okay, great. The next conversation is actually the tool itself. So prior to our last meeting, this tool was input in here so that we had a standardized tool that we were using. It has been suggested that we remove the tool and give the governing board the ability to find a tool that is most appropriate for them and to vote on using that tool. So I'll open that up for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You may.
Yeah, I'm okay with removing the tool itself because, we seem to, as a board, always go back and reflect on what tool we're going to use, and there's always seems to be little changes that we make to it. And so this gives us the ability to adjust that tool when needed as a board, and I'm okay with that.
Mr. President.
You may.
I agree that I'm not in love with this tool. I don't think that it accurately reflects the evaluation of the superintendent. I do think we need to agree to a tool because I think it's fair to the employee to know how they're being evaluated, just as we evaluate teachers and administrators. They know what the tool is. So I think I'm more than open to changing the tool, but I do think that the tool should be in policy so that the expectation is clear. And I would just like to see language added, whatever we decide about the tool, that the superintendent be required to provide evidence in support of their evaluation. Mm-hmm. So I didn't see that language here.
Any other discussion?
Well, I will concur the board and the superintendent have a clear understanding of what the tool is. Just using this tool several years, this, for those who haven't been through this process, this becomes a check the box exercise and becomes pretty difficult to really evaluate a superintendent's performance. I'd like to see a better tool. I think we can maybe put language in here that just says a tool shall be defined at the beginning of each observational or each evaluation period. Because what may work one year, there may be another tool that we find that works better for the second year. I do agree we shouldn't blindside the superintendent at the end of the evaluation period, show them, we got this one we're going to rate you on. But that wouldn't be very good. But I just hate to lock us into one, or we should have at the beginning of each evaluation period, whatever that time of the new year is, which I think is still to be determined based off of some work you're doing, then we'll be able to agree to that tool for that evaluation year.
Mr. President.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with pretty much everything that you just said. If we could write in somewhere, somehow, that the tool has to be decided upon by the board before the school year begins, so that the superintendent has it from the beginning of the year and then knows how they're being evaluated over the course of the year. I think that would, give us the ability to be flexible and change tools as we need to, because once you put it in policy, it's so hard to make changes. Like, if you don't have to make it policy, it's probably best not to, in order to have some flexibility and make adjustments if we learn that it's just not great, and you want to be able to kind of flex on the spot if you need to. But if we could vote on one at the beginning of the school year, so that the superintendent has it in hand, knows how they'll be evaluated at the end of the year, that feels fair and still allow flexibility.
So prior to the school year or prior to the evaluation year?
I mean, I think that they should know how they're being evaluated for the entire year. So before the school year, you give them, this is how we're going to evaluate you at the end of the school year, so that they can have it in hand and use it to help set their goals, help check themselves in periodically. My job, we have quarterly check-ins, and we have to see we have to give evidence of how we're meeting our goals for the year every quarter, make sure we're still on track. So if she, same thing. If they have it in hand for the whole year, then they can keep track of themselves as well. And to me, it feels like a more fair evaluation. If they've only got it 30 days before the evaluation period, how do they know that they've been hitting that for the whole year? Yeah.
Any other conversation? Okay. All right. Moving on. On page 7, you'll notice that President Todd asked for language put in that says all school sites and/or committees will follow open meeting law.
I have a question. Does this mean like the teacher advisory committee would need to be like noticed?
I think yes. I think we hear all the time that teachers didn't hear from an advisory council. So in transparency, if we follow this law for everything we do, then we don't have any questions later. They can see the agenda, they can then review it, give input to their site council or their teacher advisory committee representative. And it's much like we do in this meeting. It gives their constituents the opportunity to respond to them, attend the meeting, let them know their opinions. And I think it's solid. I do believe site councils are already required by statute to be. We had a ruling on that 8 or 9 years ago from the AG's office. It's documented that they had to follow open meeting law. Not really sure that that's happening, but
We're sure about that one.
yeah, I know positive it's somewhere in writing from the AG's office.
I wouldn't argue with you
Yeah.
about it.
My question to staff would be, do you feel that teachers are going to feel comfortable giving feedback about things if it's open to the public, I guess?
I do not.
So
Again, I will follow.
my concern about it is that the statute's very clear that if anybody's giving recommendation to the board, I need to follow the open meeting law. So if you're going to come to us at any point and say, I met with the Teacher Advisory Council and they say this, in a roundabout sort of way, that's giving advice to the board. So if we're going to hear their words, I think we need to err on the side of caution of the open meeting law. And they expect us to conduct business this way. We need to do that for all of our committees, same with the site councils, everything else, because otherwise we can't take advice. The Teacher Advisory Council used to be a board-appointed committee. I'm not so sure that that's not a bad thing to go back to. When they got in trouble for not following the open meeting law at the time, superintendent was Dr. Rogers. He switched it to a superintendent meeting and somewhat skirted it. However, it has been discussed in different trainings since that time that this is not a clean way of advising, of having that committee, because if any of that input is coming back to the board, it needs to be an open meeting.
Okay, we can follow that.
The rule right now is if it's a board-appointed committee, it's subject to the open meeting law. If it's a superintendent or administrative committee, then it's not required. But,
Right.
But you can.
But if they're bringing advice back to the board, that's the other language in the law. If they're bringing that information back, if the superintendent wants to have a committee about
I know that's
birthday
true.
celebration, a feel good, that it doesn't have to come back because the board's not taking action. But if it's coming back to the board to say, Teacher Advisory Committee believes this, that's coming back, and that's the dangerous part of the interpretation of that law.
I know that's true with curriculum instruction when they're adopting curriculum, but I don't know about other, making other recommendations to the board, other committees that might be administrative. So I can't answer that specifically, but I do know it is an accurate statement if it is curriculum instruction material.
Any other discussion? Okay, that is all of the changes that will be made to chapters 1 and 2. My last question to the board is currently you have me scheduled for May 19th. That is the only meeting that I'm scheduled for, and we have several reads and additional information to go over. So I'm curious if there is time that the board would like to set aside so that I can book you onto my calendar as well before I fill up over the summer months.
Can we maybe get Ms. Camerata to work with the board and find some dates that would work? Certainly, we're going to need some dates, but with summer vacations, everything coming up, everybody may still be planning that. So can we get to you like within the week?
And then just as a reminder that your current contract with ASBA ends on June 1st. Is it June 1st or June
I think
30th?
it's
June 30th.
June
The ASBA contract is over June 30th at the end of the fiscal year. The trust one starts July 1.
And I would suggest when we meet next that we review these policies, chapters 1 and 2 again, so that you have everything fresh in your minds. And then look towards possible adoption of the ones that we can. That's all. Thank you.
All right, members, that brings us up to item 1.7, board comments on agenda topics and items for future consideration.
Mr. President,
Yes, ma'am.
my request is to have an agenda item for an update regarding the direction we gave our attorney in executive session on April 21st.
She's working on that, I know. I'm not sure if we'll have anything by then, but she will come to us at the first opportunity as soon as she has an update for us. Anything else?
Mr. President,
Yes, ma'am.
can we get an update on the potential changes to the meeting schedule? I know it was brought up and potentially going back to 2 a month. Right now, we have a calendar for next school year, but it's only once and it's on Tuesdays. So for those of us who plan very far in advance, if we could try to get at least the first few months scheduled that'd be great.
I think that was agendized for our next general meeting, which should be the 21st, right? Is that when's our next general meeting? May 13th.
Great, thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, hearing none, we'll move to item 1.8, which is our current schedule.
Mr. President,
Yes.
May 13th is a Tuesday, not a Monday. So is it on like May 12th or
I-
Tuesday the 13th?
June 10th is also a Tuesday, not a Monday.
President Todd,
Yes.
a revised calendar schedule has not come before the board yet. So May 13th is still the meeting on the calendar.
Okay, but I think their question is you have Monday, May 13th, and that should be Tuesday, May 13th.
Excuse me. Yes, that should be Tuesday.
Okay, same with June 10th.
Yes.
Okay.
So can I just get some clarification? I know you said at the next meeting that you're going to have an agenda item about future meetings, but are we meeting on Monday, May 12th, or are we meeting on Tuesday, May 13th?
It'd be Tuesday, May 13th at this time.
Okay. And then the work study session, I thought that we were having a retiree reception at 4:30. So are we really having a study session on that day?
Mr. President, the May 13th is a Tuesday, and that's usually a tradition is to celebrate the retirees on that date. However, it'd be up to you guys to discuss if you want the work study at 4:30 or if you want it at 5:30. And the reception would be at 4:30 to 5:15 with your work study happening at 5:30. So you guys can decide what you would like to do.
So the retiree celebration is going to be on the 13th or the 19th? I think I heard both.
Tuesday, May 13th.
Okay. That answer. So do you want to do a 5:30 work session?
I just am wondering, are we okay? I know that we need to continue to have work sessions. I'm not disagreeing with that fact by any means because we need to move the policies. But if we're going to recognize our retirees in the meeting, do they need to sit through a work study session?
No, I think we could reverse that and do the work study session after the regular board meeting as well. Do that. Also, I think, Dr. Mahorn, wasn't this the day we were talking about maybe needing to push for something else? Maybe push it back a week to the following? Okay, so so possibly staff may ask us to move the May 13th meeting, to push it back a week. You should know here within a couple days probably. Okay. So let's just hold these dates, but know that the 13th may get pushed to the 19th, which would then be the retiree, a general or regular governing board meeting, and the work study session.
If that happens, can I suggest that maybe we still do a work study session the week of the 13th or 12th? Because that 19th was just going to be, designed for policy to give us an extended period of time to work through these policies.
Yeah, that could certainly be worked out, I'm sure. All right, next up, item 2.1, the adjournment of the special meeting. It's 7:28. We'll show the meeting adjourned.